Hi everyone, this is James from F9 Audio and the Freemasons, and welcome to the third and final video covering swing in music production. Today we're going to show you how to swing bass lines, how to swing rhythm parts, and how to make this track. So let's dive straight in, but first of all I want to show you some of the secrets of swing that I've learned over the years. So let's start our investigation of the world of swing inside the MPC, and I'm here in the software version of the latest incarnation. This software works with a variety of MPC hardware controllers, including the Renaissance unit that I'm using here. It's also got an incredibly clear grid system, so it's going to be very useful as we talk about the different divisions within a bar. House is definitely back on the world stage at the moment, so let's start our tour using a standard house beat. Now there are a couple of ways to swing inside the MPC system, but because we're not viewing the hardware, we're only viewing the software, I'm going to use the same method each time. I'm going to come over to the right here, the top right, and see where it says time correct. I'm going to select the grid we want, in this case 16, select the percentage value that I want of swing, bearing in mind in the MPC system 50% equals no swing. In this case we're going to use 60, so I'm now going to select all the notes, come to the time correct menu at the top and select apply. You'll see the key command there next to it. We're going to be using this in future. Now, as you saw there, nothing happened. Now, why is this? You would surely expect some of them to move to a different grid value, as we've seen before. And it's simply because this is a straight 8 beat. Not one of these drum sounds is positioned on a division that is going to be susceptible to swing. These divisions are subdivisions 2 and 4. Now, let's illustrate what I mean here. On pad 5, I've got a very sharp 808 style hi-hat. And I'm going to come up here to the pencil tool, and in our grid view, I'm just going to draw straight 16ths across the entire 2-bar pattern. Now the divisions that I'm talking about that are susceptible to swing are divisions 2 and divisions 4, and that's in every subdivided part of the bar. Now I'm just going to quickly shorten all of these hi-hat notes, you'll see why in a moment. Then I'm going to select all, and once again I'm going to apply our swing. Now we've talked about this before, but here it is clear as day. Only divisions 2 and divisions 4 are ever going to be susceptible to a 16th swing. Now it is possible to apply an 8th swing, and say you wanted to lay back these open hi-hats a bit, I could come up to time correct, to 8ths, drop it down a little bit and do the same. But it can be an acquired taste. It sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's something to really experiment with. And we're going to be sticking with 16th swings for the rest of this tutorial. So let's see where we are so far. It's got a nice bass swing to it, but there's not much interest in it, it's fairly static. So to accent some of the individual swung divisions, I'm going to use this shaker on pad 13. Now that's really picked out some of those swung divisions, but also being different between bars 1 or 2, it's really helped create this into a more cohesive loop. But for me, our new sound is jumping out just a little bit too much and making the rhythm sound a little bit anxious. And now it's time for one of the most important secrets of swing. It's not just the position of the notes, it's the volume of those sounds in relation to the other elements in the track that can make or break a swung groove. So I'm just going to bring down the level of our new shaker and bed it into the track a little bit. And you saw me change the velocities of one of the notes there, and that's a great way to change the volume of one particular note within a pattern. So now let's add some more sounds into some of the other swing divisions and see if we can play off some of the rhythms already there. Now it's worth quickly bedding that new shaker back into the track. There is one thing that's really standing out, this snare drum. and it's on the last 16th of each bar, and to find out why that's so important, we need another quick history lesson. Now I need to make quite a bold statement. There is in any bar one division that is more important than any other when you're applying swing, and that's the last 16th of any bar. If you work with this correctly, you can add a real funk to your rhythms. It can be completely magical when you get it right, and to illustrate this, let's listen to some old funk. Kool and the Gang are often known for their later disco work, but in the early 70s they released some incredible funk recordings, and this is the first two bars of 1973's Jungle Boogie.
Get down, 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 get down.
And it's their brilliant drummer George Brown really setting the record up. But I just want you to really concentrate now on the end of that first bar going into the second.
Get down, get down, get down, get down, get down, get
And check out that softer bass drum just before the next bar line.
down, get down, get down, get down,
And that right there is what's causing it to funk.
get down, get down, get down.
Now in the second half of this actual riff, there's some fantastic bass drum work just on the section turnaround.
Get down, get down, get down, get down, get down.
And he's using all of the offbeats there. So let's use some of that inspiration for our own work. And to do that, we're going to head over to Native Instruments Machine. So here we are in Machine, and that was the straight 2-bar drum pattern that we're going to be using. Now there's something I need to make very clear in Machine before we begin. If you look at the top toolbar, you'll notice here a value 0% swing. Native Instruments have a completely bespoke implementation of swing on Machine, and it's worth getting to grips with quite early. Particularly if you're used to the MPC systems where 50% equals no swing, here 0% equals no swing. One other thing to be aware is that a 16th swing, the kind of swing you're going to be dealing with most of the time, is actually considered an 8th cycle within Native Instruments system. Now I know this may seem confusing at first, but once you get used to it, it's fairly straightforward. And on the F9 site, we do have a cheat card that has a table that allows you to compare these differing swing values. So if you're using a mixture of systems, you can easily swap between them. Okay, so let's get to work. Currently our pattern only has one main kick drum. And in the track it sounds like this. Now what I want to use is another softer kick drum on that very last 16th, and here I've got another kick set up on pad 2. Here's the main. So I'm just going to play that in on the last 16th of each bar. And I'll just quickly quantize them to straight 16ths. And now for the fun part. Machine allows us to apply swing either as an entirety, in other words everything that's playing within the machine, or on an individual group of 16 pads, or even on a per sound basis. It's very similar to the way you apply effects in Machine. You can either affect the entire machine, an individual group of 16 pads, or an individual sound. And if we go to the macro section, you'll see that by clicking the tabs at the top, each section has its own groove control which brings up the swing dial. So let's add a bit of overall swing. I'm going to head for the master tab and just turn up the swing amount, which will swing the entire pattern. And you can hear how much control you have there over the rhythm. Now the one thing I am noticing is that I may want to swing that new kick we recorded in slightly more than say the hi-hats. So I'm going to set our overall swing to something lower like 19%, and then let's see how far we can push this kick. So I'm going to click on the sound tab, then the groove control so I can see the swing, and then I'm going to apply slightly more swing to this one individual sound than we have on the rest of the pattern. Now it's already starting to work, but remember what we said earlier with the MPC. It's not just about the placement of the notes, it's also about their tone and their volume. So I'm going to use a filter to take off some of this kick's high frequency information. And also let's tweak its volume so it's less prominent against the main kick. And it's just added that extra little bit of spice to our pattern. So with the inspiration of that Kool in the Gang record, let's add some more bass drums to the second half of this pattern. Now, during our investigations on the MPC, we saw that only Divisions 2 and Divisions 4 are going to be susceptible to swing. So let's randomly put a couple in. In fact, we'll go crazy at the end and just see what happens. Now that's worked really well. I may just tweak some of the velocities because, as we've mentioned, it's not always about the placement, it's also to do with the level that can really help these things work. So I'm sure now you're starting to appreciate the power of using a variety of swings within your production. So now let's round up everything that we've learned so far and use it to make a track. So let's dive straight in, and we're here in Ableton Live, and let's remind ourselves of what we're going to be building today. So a nice solid house production, we're at 120 BPM and the basic rhythm framework is coming from one of the F9 audio drum tracks called Purist. For more information about the Drum Track series of products, come to f9-audio.com or our exclusive distribution partner, Loopmasters. These are basically professional level drum stems that allow you to work through a production at speed. So that we can start afresh, I'm just going to quickly remove most of these parts from the first 8 bars. This is now our fresh rhythm framework. Now, even though there is a degree of swing within the hi-hats, for example, it's nothing like the main part of the track that sounds like this. It's interesting to hear when I put them in solo, how the swing of the track is being generated by the lower MIDI parts. Many of these MIDI parts are actually playing on the 16th divisions that would be susceptible to swing. Now, these divisions are often considered the softer part of any rhythm, but when they're placed carefully over a framework that is concentrating on the 8ths, this is when the magic of swing happens. So I've cleared us down to 8 blank bars on the arrangement with just a small intro, and we're going to work on the bass first. The bass is from Massive, and it's one sound from a huge patch collection we've been working on at F9 for over 6 months. It's nice and chunky, and it sounds like this. I've got some nice macro controls, so if I turn up the blam, it will start to sound like this. And here's another one just right for tweaking the low res control. Now these are going to be perfect for automating later on to add interest to the static bass part and build tension. So now, doing my very best not to balls it up, I'm going to play our bass line in over the top of the rhythm track. Now, over the years, I've got used to playing with a bit of swing, but don't worry if you're struggling at first. You'll soon get the hang of it once you get to know how the rhythms feel. Now, before we apply any swing, I'm going to want to set a straight quantize to all of these MIDI parts. By double-clicking on the clip in the Arrange page, I can actually inspect all the MIDI notes down the bottom, and by zooming in, I can see things aren't too bad. By looking at the bottom right of the MIDI inspector, I can see we're at 32nd resolution, and I want to switch this to a 16th grid. To do that, I right-click on the background of the MIDI inspector, and in the contextual menu that pops up, I select the 16th grid. Now it's easier to see the timing errors that we've got in the clip that we played in. So now let's quantize them straight before we apply the swing. Select all the notes, and I'm going to do that using Command A, then right-click or Control-click on any of the notes and bring up the quantize setting window. Now, as you can see, I've set this just to quantize the start of the notes. I don't want to remove all of the feel, and sometimes by quantizing the end of the notes, you can do that. Now, when I hit OK, it's going to quantize the notes to a straight 16th grid. Now you can hear the first note in the actual main bass pattern slightly wrong, and it's because it's jumped to the wrong 16th division. So I've got two choices here. I can either go into the MIDI editor and grab that first offending note and push it to the right line, or I can select the bit where it is correct, hit Command E to separate, and then copy it to the front. Either way will work. We'll stick with the first for now. The bass line is currently completely straight, so let's start adding swing to it. Now if I come down to the groove pool, down here on the bottom left, in the drop-down menu where we're selecting the grooves in Ableton, you'll see I've got a series of swings already set up, and I'm going to use 67% MPC for this bass part. Now here's a workflow that I use a lot inside of Ableton. I'm going to trim the end off this bass part, and now I'm going to select the 8-bar section that we're going to be wanting to repeat. We've got a grace note at the beginning, but don't worry too much about that. Now go to the edit menu, and I'm going to use the split function, and the key command for that will be shown next to it in the menu. Using the split function alongside the duplicate function is a perfect way to move things around inside of Ableton. So I'm now going to come up to the edit menu and select duplicate, not duplicate time by the way. The duplicate command will copy pretty much anything in Ableton. If I select the track here on the right, I can copy that track completely using the same command. And it's not just for use on the arrange page. You can also duplicate plugins and clip scenes using this method. So now let's have a listen to our bass part. It sounds quite lonely being the only swung element within the track at the moment. So let's now add some soft snare drums to help the rhythm out. We've got a very tasty 909 snare sound here. Nicely processed, and let's just whack it in on some of the weaker divisions. Now we probably won't need all of them, but it's quite good to give yourself some variation whilst you're playing parts in. To get rid of this odd looping thing that happens in Ableton, I'm just going to select the part in the Arrange view, right-click on it to bring up the contextual menu, and select Consolidate. Now Ableton has already applied the 67% swing to this part, so I'm just going to straighten out the initial notes before it hits that swing quantize. So I'm going to use the Select All command, and then I'm going to right-click or Control-click on any of the MIDI notes and bring up the quantize setting box. And once again, straight 16ths. And now our swing grid is being applied non-destructively to the clip. I'm going to concentrate on the second half of this region. Now I'm fairly happy with that, so let's copy that now to the front. And I'm going to select both, and I'm going to use the duplicate command again, just to fit them straight into the second part. And you saw how quick that was at actually making an arrangement change. That's why it's a great idea to learn the duplicate and split functions. The next thing I'm going to add are a couple of low hits just to bring out certain parts of the rhythm that we've got going between the bass and the snares. There we go. Dirty old 909 kick drums with a nice load of distortion on top of them. Exactly the kind of thing my mother would hate. Okay, here we go. Now that's the rhythm part that I actually want to bring out, but I've played them slightly off grid. So I'm just going to do the same again, put them into a straight quantize. So once again, control click or right click on the actual notes within the MIDI inspector, hit quantize, and then come down here and select whichever groove that you feel is working. Now at the moment today, Ableton seems to be automatically putting everything on. Brilliant, don't have to do anything. When you're using swings, where an ending of a note falls can be just as important as the front. So here I'm just going to try and extend the second note out. And I could even end it directly on that subdivision there. And I'm just going to move this part into the second half of our arrangement, so we've already got something gently building. So let's now put in some fast 16th hats on the second half of our arrangement. And here I've got some 909 samples ready. And watch me now dismally fail as I try and put one on every 16th completely in time. As you can see, no chance of me doing a real-time machine performance video anytime soon. Anyway, let's select them all and quantize. That's not bad, they've kind of fitted nicely onto the grid. However, I am going to be quite particular about this and say, right, let's actually just grab a couple of them, get the length of them exactly right, and maybe delete the rest, and then start copying. And I've got a small section there that's already working. Just going to zoom in a little bit, select it, and again duplicate. And you see it just overwrites whatever there. It's a brilliant way, as I say, of zipping around your arrangement and adding parts. So now let's have a listen to them, bearing in mind that they've already been quantized to the correct swing value down here, 67%. That's a little too strong as a swing, so let me just see if we can change one part. I'm actually going to loop this part and then stretch it out. Whoa, of course, then we need to actually tell it how long the part is. Much better. Now I'm going to take every other division within the pattern and just drop the velocity to about 50% of its original value. Now this is what we were talking about in the MPC section of the video. Often it's the level of the individual element or the velocity that's triggering that level that can make all the difference to a swing. Not bad. I may actually change it to a different swing, and within the pool I've got 65% here. Let's hear how that sounds. Now there's something still a bit fishy, and this is always accentuated within high frequency elements. And it's normally because you've got some kind of audio loop or an audio track that has its own swing applied that's slightly different to the one that you're working in. Now as you've seen from the other videos, this is quite easy to sort out within Ableton. The warp mode is Beats, the correct one for this kind of job. And now I'm just going to change the transient loop mode to its first value, so it's going to slice the audio up. Now I'm going to attach a series of warp markers to this audio part where I think the main transients are. And now I can apply a swing grid using the 16th swing within the groove pool. Now let's copy these edited parts across and see what happens. Now I'm just going to play around with some of the warp and transposition settings to see if I can get a better take on this. Oh no, that's awful. And what I've ended up doing there in the end is just dropping the transposition value of the hats back a little bit so the chops last a little bit longer and sound a little bit more natural. And to make sure we have consistency across the entire production, I'm just going to copy these new edited hi-hat parts into the 4 bars before. Now it's all starting to come together nicely, but as you've seen there, anything with a lot of high-end information often takes a bit of massaging into place. I think just the swing values become more apparent the brighter the sound is. So now I'm going to add just a small percussion element that's fairly pokey and it's going to accent one particular beat within our swung rhythm. Here's the sound I'm using. And I'm just going to whack it in and give it some variation as I do. I'm just going to trim the end off the recording and go through our quantize procedure straight first and then apply the swing. And I may just lay this back even more. Let's use 69%. Great, now I much prefer the first bit, so I'm just going to quickly split that and, as we did before, duplicate it across the entire arrangement. Now later on we're going to slowly add some parallel reverb to this, so as it builds up and we can use it to kind of introduce arrangement changes and new sections within the track. Now I want to add a hi-hat ghost, and I've got a copy here of the 909 hat we've been using. And if we look on the channel strip, I've just applied a little bit of shelf EQ to make it slightly duller than the hi-hat that it's actually going to be ghosting. Now what I mean by a ghost is that the new hi-hat is going to play directly on the 16th division after the principal hi-hat. So this is where the main hat fires, and where my cursor line is now is where we want the new hat to appear. So in fact, actually, let's just draw it in. I'm going to select an area, insert a MIDI clip, and then open that MIDI clip for editing, if it will let me. Now let's find our hi-hat. On this page, we're quite a way zoomed in. I would say this is the one. And when I hit the MIDI keyboard, you can see that this note's being illuminated. Go to 16th grid, and I'll put it on to that last 16th. Now if we open up, there we can see it's perfectly in the right place. And I'm going to apply the 67% swing. Now here comes the artistic decision about where you want to put them. Now I know from experience that they sound pretty good every other main hi-hat and probably towards the end of the bar. In fact, we don't need that first one. I would say that last one is sounding great. So let's start to duplicate that and see where we fit. Nice, it's really starting to bring out some of that swung rhythm. Now, if I bring them closer together and actually solo them, we can hear that our ghost hi-hat is actually louder than our principal hi-hat. So let's just kind of bed these two together. Now it's going to take a little bit of gentle massaging, but these are high frequency elements and we've got to get them right. Now it's definitely worth spending the time to be particular about the placement of some of these swung elements, and as you become more experienced in swing, you'll end up with your own favourite positions to put things like shakers, hi-hats, snares, etc. Right, so now it's time to add some big punctuation marks to our track, and I am going to use the very last 16th, that magic 16th of any bar, and I'm going to try and fit this enormous snare drum on it. It's quite a big sound to be using up that vital last 16th of the bar, but I want to use it to accentuate the beginning of each new section. I've played it slightly off grid there, but you get the idea. I'm just going to now drag it onto the correct 16th and apply our swing. Now I'm just going to add some extra high-end interest on the downbeat, and I've got a nice 808 stretch cymbal here. And last up, I want to use an additional slightly tougher snare just to pick up some of the rhythms that we're generating with the bass line and some of the other swung elements. And you can hear it's a really cutting snare. It sounds like it's directly from an SP1200, the kind of thing that's been used in classic house and garage for years. So I've played in quite an overly busy part there, but it's just to give us some options whilst we're editing. So once again, straight quantize and then come down to the swing selector, and let's try a slightly higher amount this time. I'm going to go for 69%. Pretty good, although it may be a bit much at the end. Or having said that, that might work at the end of an 8-bar section. So I'm going to grab that last bar we've recorded and move it there. Just a little bit of editing to do on this part now. I'm going to duplicate some parts and move a few other bits around. I'm basically just trying to make a cohesive 8-bar section. And when you want to create one consolidated part of your edits, select all the parts that you want to join together, right-click or control-click on any one of them, and go for the consolidate option, the key command shown there on the right. Okay, so let's do some basic arrangement now on our production. So first of all, I'm just going to clear down any legacy bits further on down the timeline. And then I'm simply going to select our first 8 bars and hit duplicate. There you go, easy as that. So the part I'm going to use as a building element is our bonk percussion. And applied to the track, I've got a parallel reverb system. It's quite simple, it just basically has one command called more, and as you turn it up, reverb comes up in parallel. So the original, it's not like a wet-dry command, the original always stays at the same level. Now I could record this in as parameter automation, but I find in these circumstances it's much easier just to draw this in with an automation envelope. The sound doesn't play particularly frequently, so I'm just going to bring the automation start point back a little, and I'm also going to change the curve on it so it rises quicker. Ableton by default copies its automation perfectly, and I want the reverb to slam straight back down to 0 at the beginning of the next bar. And it's easy for me to do that actually just by duplicating, because if we look back at the beginning of this now 16 bar section, the automation's at 0. So when I duplicate it, this will happen automatically. I've got the same parallel reverb chain available on the bass sound, so let's just draw a similar curve in. So zooming out, and let's just see where we are with the bonk as a visual reference. And now if I draw the 2 nodes in, it's quite easy to do a similar rise. Now I do want it to slam back down on that downbeat, so I'm going to do that using Ableton's pencil tool. The pencil tool has a variety of functions around Ableton, but when you're dealing with automation, it allows you to draw values straight in. And now I've zeroed the automation out on the bars following. Now you remember our massive macros from earlier on. Well, I've got the blam control already set up for automation, so I'm just going to draw in an automation curve on the last 4 bars of this segment. I still want it to slam back down again, so once again I'm going to use the pencil tool just to zero out the automation in the bars following. Great, so you can see with just in a few clicks how we're easily starting to make an arrangement. And as we bring those elements in and out, for example, I could take the tougher snares out and just use them at fills here at the beginning. And we probably don't need, where's our fast hats? Let's bring them in just on the second half. It's a much more concise arrangement now, and let's play through. Great, that's really starting to come together well, and we've got some nice high frequency lifts in the arrangement courtesy of those hi-hats. Now, one of the reasons that we've managed to put this together so quickly is that we're working from a really solid drum foundation thanks to the F9 drum tracks. The drum tracks range of products is designed to bring professional level drums to everybody in stem form. These aren't just individual loops made in isolation, these are parts created, produced and mixed to work together in a hybrid studio using the very best of hardware and software processes. But we didn't stop there. These have also been sent to Wired Masters, one of the world leaders in stem mastering. And Kevin at Wired has applied exactly the same techniques that he would do to any professional stems arriving at his studio. That means that these drum stems have been through the exact same process as any Freemasons production or remix. To my knowledge, it's the first time it's been done, and I can't wait to see what you guys do with them. The best music is always the result of collaboration, and that's exactly the kind of landscape we're trying to create here at F9. And just in case you were wondering, there's hardly anything on my master fader. There's just a glue compressor and a limiter, the FabFilter Pro L. And this is what we managed to come up with in a few minutes. So thanks for watching this first set of videos on Swing from F9 Audio. For more information, visit the F9 Audio label page at Loopmasters or direct to us at f9-audio.com. There are a couple of free Drum Tracks products on the site, so you can download and test the system, as well as essential training on how to use them. There are also plenty more tutorials on the F9 blog. You can always subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, and all of our social media links are available on the main website. I hope this has inspired you to add some swing into your productions, and we'll see you next time.